Assalamu alaikum friends, welcome to lecture 18 of SBL. This is a new section in your SBL syllabus, that is section D, risk. There are going to be two lectures under risk, lecture 18 and lecture 19. Risk is one of the easiest in terms of understanding the concept, but if you go to the textbook, the Kaplan textbook or BBB textbook, I'm referring Kaplan textbook, so let me talk about it. The Kaplan textbook, there are two chapters. Hence, one chapter I've taken has lecture 18, the other one is the next stage of risk, that is, you manage, monitor, and mitigate the risk. That comes in lecture 19, the next chapter, which is under risk. So, when you go through the chapter in the textbook, it's quite big, it's very lengthy because risk they have explained in so much of detail. Well, what I did, I summarized it, I made it in short, I didn't explain so much, and I will try to keep this lecture as short as possible because as I know the exams are almost near. Okay, I just 2 3 days left, and it's not possible to go through the big lecture, and risk is one of the easiest to explain also and also to study also, so it will not take so much of time to know what is risk. We all know what is risk. So this lecture we are going to do the first stage of risk, that is, you identify the risk. After you identify, you assess the risk, and after you assess, you should know how to measure the risk, quantification of risk. Okay, so we are going to focus all this 10 areas in this lecture, that is, we compare, we see why corporate governance is important. So risk and corporate governance. Next, the necessity of risk management, why risk is important and why you have to manage the risk. Third, risk management. Fourth, you identify the risk into two categories, one is known as strategic, one is known as operational. Strategic is long term risk, operational is day-to-day risk. We'll go through in depth with the examples and all, because that is one of the most important area in your SBL exam also, strategic and operational risk. Then we go again to risk identification, business risk. There are numerous business risk, I think around 20 risk, maybe 15 20 risks are there. Then again risk identification, but you categorize and risk relationship. Among the two risk, what could be a relationship? Then the impact on the stakeholders, assessing the risk. Once after identification stage is over, you go to assess the risk, then risk perception, then comes a risk register where you list down all the risk that you have identified. So now starting with the overall what we are going to cover in this lecture. This is a snapshot, you can say, overall picture what we are going to cover in this lecture. So first, starting from the top, identify and analyzing risk is divided into three categories. One is risk identification, the other one is risk assessment. Let us go to the risk. So risk, what is the definition of risk, then corporate governance, and what is the necessity of risk and risk management. Okay, corporate governance basically means risk management only. Once you know the risk, once you know why risk is important, say risk is not always bad. Okay, don't think it's a negative thing or you should always avoid. Sometimes you need risk, because the risk, with risk you will get return. Okay, then only you can maximize shareholders wealth. Okay, so necessity of risk, and then you need to manage the risk. Coming to the second, risk identification, what are the sources and the impact of the risk. And once you categorize, okay, categorization, there are three. One is strategic versus operational, then general versus specific sector risk. Okay, general means those that affects all the industries, specific means only for particular sector, that risk is very important. Then we go to the risk assessment. See, risk assessment always comes under risk identification. Okay, you cannot assess the risk if you haven't identified the risk correctly. That's why you always have to start with the risk identification. If you're correct here, if you're able to identify the risk correctly in the correct category, with what is the impact, like whether it is sector, whether it is general, whether it is strategic, whether it is operational, you will be able to then correctly do the risk assessment. Okay, so risk assessment is the last stage in a sense of for this lecture. After risk assessment also we have further stages that will be in the next lecture. So risk assessment, what is the severity and the probability. Severity means how intense the impact could be, and probability means what is the probability of it occurring. Is it very remote? Is it very likely to happen or unlikely? Then risk perception. How do you perceive the risk? How do you view the risk, like whether you take it as an objective or a subjective? Then impact on the stakeholders. Ultimately put together a big picture. Risk, why are we studying? Just to know what is the impact on the stakeholders, because risk could affect any business. I mean, who wants to have risk, high risk? If any organization, an investor wants to invest, what do they look for? They look what is the risk. If it's very risky, highly risky, they will not invest there. So risk has to be at an appropriate level. You cannot say there will be zero level of risk, no risk at all. It never happens. In practical world, never happens. You can minimize the risk to a certain level. Okay, and there are various ways of dealing with different types of risk. Risk is not one particular type, just avoid or reduce. No, everywhere you cannot reduce risk. Okay, so we'll see that how we deal. So starting with the corporate governance, the first. Now, what are the principles and what are in the context of risk? Okay, OECD. Okay, they have a OECD principles of good corporate governance. That means according to OECD, you have to deal with the risk. So the principle says there are 5 principles relating to the risk. Okay, in the OECD principles that says right of shareholder. That means every shareholder's right needs to be protected. It's very simple, right? So here, in the context of the risk, what is it? Risk could be that companies might not allow their shareholders to exercise their rights. They might not give all those rights to shareholders. They might not provide necessary information to the shareholder which shareholders demand. Then second principle is equitability treatment of shareholders and stakeholders. All shareholders or stakeholders needs to be treated equally, whether they are foreign shareholders or domestic shareholders, whether they are minority shareholders or majority shareholders. Okay, they need to be treated fairly and same. So for the in the context of the risk, maybe they are not offered the same price for their holding when you are acquiring. Okay, shareholders might not be not all shareholders might be offered the same price. And some stakeholders, for example, the minority groups of shareholders might be treated unfairly compared to the majority. Even in terms of stakeholders also, some stakeholders might be given so much of priority, some you might not be thinking also at all. Okay, for example, you might attempt to make employees redundant without even consulting the employees. You might think employees are also important. It's like that. So employees are being treated unfairly. Next, third principle is disclosure and transparency. That means we all know adequately you have and in timely you have to disclose and be transparent, especially regarding the financial situation of the company. Okay, and you disclose when you think the matter is very material, that it needs to be disclosed. You are not going to disclose every immaterial little things that's very insignificant. In the risk, it could be that directors do not provide appropriate reports of financial statements. Okay, one biggest example we all know is Enron. Okay, what did they do? Their internal controls failed to identify any risk relating to the financial statements. They did not disclose the off-balance sheet financing, the leases. So this that means the internal control they failed to detect the fraud and the other irregularities in the Enron. Even the auditor was involved here, Arthur Edison. After Enron's case is dismissed, right? Is out of practicing audit. He cannot practice audit after that any longer. So that's big risk, right? Not just in terms of the risk to the company, but there is a risk to the reputation of the auditors also. After which Sarbanes-Oxley Act came, a stricter rule in US. Responsibility of the that's why the risk is very important. That's why this area is very important that we are studying it in depth. We all know risk is bad, avoided risk. Okay, but what type of risk needs to be avoided? What type of risk needs to be accepted? We should know that as well. Fourth principle is responsibility of the board. Okay, the board should give effective as well as strategic guidance for the company. Board is a agent for the shareholder. They are working on behalf of the shareholder, so it's their responsibility that it should be effective. In terms of risk, it could be that board might not control the company adequately. Okay, for example, it might lead the company to get into losses, but still the board will be taking care of themselves rather than the company. They might be taking care of their benefit rather than the other stakeholders. Right, and the fifth, okay, I think there are just four. Okay, so these are the four principles: equitable treatment of shareholders. Okay, let's go back. Rights of shareholders, disclosure, transparency, and responsibility of the board. Okay, don't forget the principle. Next, we are moving to the from the corporate governance, we are moving to the necessity of risk and risk management. That is the second topic. Okay, first define what is risk. Okay, very easy. That means unrealized future losses arising from present action or inaction. Sometimes you might not do anything and you might face a risk. Sometimes you do an action and you face a risk. Could be either way. Unrealized future loss. That means in future you're going to lose something, but it's not realized yet. It's not. It didn't happen yet. It's just a risk. You might or you might not. It's like you're betting, but the risk is there, right? You might lose. So unrealized future loss. Definition and all don't pay so much of attention. Okay, what matters is how you're going to mitigate the risk and how you categorize the risk. These two areas are very important. And what are the roles of different parties to risk management, like risk registers there, then the risk committee, then the bored. These things you should be knowing more, paying attention to more than the definition of the risk. Okay, risks are opportunities and dangers, both opportunity and dangers associated with uncertain future events. Okay, future is very uncertain. We don't know what it is. That's why it's risky, because we don't know whether it will be good or bad. So risks can sometimes bring opportunities for you, or it could be a danger for you. Both ways. Okay, they can have an adverse effect or a favorable impact. You might have a loss, you might have a profit. Why incur risk then? We know risk is okay, opportunities are there, but on the other side, the negative impact is more. Then why incur risk? Because to generate higher return. Simple. Higher the return, higher the risk, higher the return. Second, if you do not accept risk, remember you cannot grow in your business. You become static. You are not dynamic. That means you are following someone else. You are following the leader strategy. I mean, you are a follower of the leader. You are not a leader. Because leaders should be willing to accept risk, should take risk. Calculative risk, not risk where they're going to lose everything. You calculate, you do your pros and cons, and then you accept or reject the risk. That's the characteristics of the entrepreneur, that they have to accept risk. So if you have to be a leader in your market, you have to accept risk, no matter whether you like it or not. Some risk you have to take. If you're not, then you are in a static position, you are limiting your opportunities to grow. Okay. Then third reason is incurring risk implies that returns from different activities will be higher. That means benefit being the return from accepting risk. Okay. So you accept the risk, you are going to get the benefit. What is the benefit? The return from different activities. And benefits can be in terms of financial, okay, or intangible. How financial? Decrease cost. Maybe your cost reduced before because of taking that risk. Or it could be an intangible forms of benefit. Maybe better quality information. Okay, out of this. Now, in both cases, business will be able to gain competitive advantage, whether it is for financial or intangible, competitive advantage they are achieving. Now, what is the benefits of taking risk? There must be benefits of taking risk also. Number one benefit is, if you can say this. Okay, this is a table. We'll go through this diagram and then we'll explain you the benefit with example. Okay, with a mobile company. What is the benefit? So first go through this table. Okay. On your horizontal axis, you can see, vertical axis, that you can see ability to gain competitive advantage. On your horizontal axis, you can see activity risk. So you compare the ability to gain competitive advantage with the risk, whether they are low, 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 high, high, low, high, or high, low. Okay, let's start diagonally because it's more easier. Low, low, where both are low, low. Activity risk is low, competitive advantage is low. What is it? It's a routine. Becomes a routine. How? Because in a routine, your risk is high. Usually, when a risk is high, it's not a routine. You do not do that every day when the risk is high. The risk is less only. And there, you cannot gain competitive advantage where's a routine, where every day you keep doing the same work. For example, you're doing data entry in the company every time. Are you going to get any competitive advantage for there? No. Is it a very risky area? Anyone can come and do it. It's a routine, no? You train anyone, anyone can come and do it. You do not require so much of skills there. Or you do not have to adapt, or you do not have to change so much. Same thing over and over again you can do. Now, high, high, both are high. You have to go in detail carefully. You have to see that. You have to keep this in your hand. It's very important because here you are going to get your high advantage and also activity risk is high. You have to balance. Then comes where activity risk is low but your competitive advantage is high. So that is number one. Identify and develop these areas. Why? Because competitive advantage is high in this area. Activity risk is low. So you need to identify these areas and you need to develop these areas more. Why? Because it's good, no? Competitive advantage is high, risk is low. That's what you want. That's the best strategy, right? So identify and develop also this area. That means keep more of this area. And the fourth one is where your competitive advantage is low, not bad, risk is high. very bad. So risk is high, advantage is low, avoid. Number 4, avoid. Okay, these are the 4 strategies that one needs to do. Now, by taking an example of a mobile company, same example for all 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll explain what is the benefit. Okay, 4 we are not going to explain because we are going to avoid it. High risk, low competitive advantage. Starting with number 2, which is a routine. So here, a mobile telephone operator, they produce a wide range of phones in different color. Okay, and also in this case, there is no risk of technology failing. Why? Because it's just a change in color. That's it. Wide range but different color. Only the changing color. Not so much of fundamental changes required in that phone. That technology changes and it will affect so much. No. So in this case, your competitive advantage is less. It's limited. Okay. And also risk is less here because it's just different color. That's it. It's not something very crucial or something which is very unique that is very difficult to make or where customers going to value it highly. So competitive advantage is limited, risk is less here. Next is identify and develop, where competitive advantage is high, risk is less, which is good area. So here, mobile phone operator, they easily amend the mobile phones to make safer regarding the electrical emission generated. Okay. So here, given that customers are concerned about the element of the mobile phone use, okay, if you able to make this kind of phone, aren't you going to get a competitive advantage in the market that you are taking care of the safety of the customer by amending it? Right, it's a source of getting competitive advantage, but its risk is less. Okay, it's not so much of risk is involved here. Then third is both are high, risk as well as advantage. Here a new type of mobile phone providing, let's say, GPA feature while you're traveling. Won't it provide a competitive advantage for the company that you are giving a GPS feature? It will give you, right, but risk is high. Risk is also high here because risk of investing in the phone is worthwhile in terms of benefit that could be achieved. Here, risk is high, but it's worthwhile having that risk because the benefit is also, you're going to get a benefit also out of it. Now, why manage risk? So after the benefit of risk, why manage risk now? We'll not say the downfalls of risk, we all know that, but why manage risk? Number 1, to identify new risk that may affect the company so an appropriate risk management strategy can be determined. When we talk about managing risk, we first need to identify risk or not. We first identify, then only we can manage that thing, no? So when we talk about managing risk, we identify new risk. Okay, because risk can affect the company. So accordingly, we can decide what should be the risk management strategy for that risk, particular risk. Next is to identify changes to the existing or known risk. Once you manage risk, you know how much your risk has changed. Okay. For example, when there's an increased likelihood of occurrence of a known risk, that means probability of a risk happening increase so much. Okay, what should be the strategy? Earlier, it was ignoring the risk. Okay, because the risk was not so important. Now, you cannot just ignore the risk. Why? Because occurrence of it happening, probability of it happening increase. So what should you do? You should insure against it. Transfer the risk to someone else. Maybe you can transfer the risk to the supplier, can transfer the risk to the customer in forms of higher prices sometimes. Right? So your strategy needs to change. That's why you have to manage risk properly. If you do not manage risk properly, your strategy will change. Your change in strategy, I mean, you will not know. You will be using the same strategy only. What you did when the risk was high. But when you reduce the risk by managing it, strategy changes. Okay, third, to ensure that the best use is made of opportunities. Yes, when you manage your risk only, you can make best use of opportunities. After you have done the activities on the risk and risk is reduced to an acceptable level, then only you can take advantage of opportunities. With so much of risk, high risk, without doing nothing about it, you cannot take advantage of opportunities. Fourth is it is a part of corporate governance. So you have to do it if you want to be ethical. If you want to comply with the rules of corporate governance, you have to manage the risk because it's required by the combined code. Managing the upside of the risk. We are talking about the downside. Now, what about the upside? That means the benefit of the risk. How do you manage it? Risks are seen as opportunities to be seized. Okay. Second, Organizations are accepting some uncertainty in order to benefit from higher rewards. Okay, so that means organizations, what do? They accept some uncertainty so that they can benefit from higher rewards. That's how they manage the upside of the risk, by accepting some of it. Third, again, you use risk management to identify the risk with the new opportunities. Then effective risk management is seen as a way of enhancing. If you manage your risk properly, it's a way that you can attract shareholders, you can enhance their value. Okay, now let us go through this process of risk management. I know I'm a bit fast, but I think you will be able to catch up with this bit because it's a risk. And we all know, we have been hearing this since childhood: risk, risk, risk. Don't do this. It's risky. Don't do that. It's very risky. So that concept is very clear in your mind. It's not something like a strategy or something like a very technical area that one needs to spend so much of hours in this. Okay. You can take it as a revision also. So process of risk management. When you go, this is the fourth. Okay, so when you process your risk management, these are the four stages. You first start with risk identification. That means all the potential risk, list them down. There could be so many types of risk which we are going to go next. What are they? Then after identification comes risk assessment, where you are going to prioritize your important risk. Not all risks you need to deal with. Some you can keep it, some are not so important, they are not so significant. Only those risks which you have prioritized to work on, to control them, to manage them, you do it in the risk assessment. That's why you assess the risk. Third, risk planning. Okay, here you come up with contingency plan or how to avoid the risk. And fourth is your risk monitoring. This need to be followed in this stage only. Don't change the steps. That means identification number one, assessment number two, planning number three, monitoring number four. Here you risk audit. Okay, again after risk monitoring is done, you go back you start with the risk assessment. So cycle keeps on continuing. Okay, annually you have to do it. It's not that once you have done risk monitoring you stop there, that's it, risk is gone. No, you have to keep annually or more frequently, keep on assessing the risk, whether it is at the same level, it increased, it reduced. Now a new framework you're going to study is enterprise risk management, that is known as ERM, the short form. What does it comprise of? Let us go through the principles of this. ERM, enterprise, the meaning is risk management, consideration of risk management in the context of business strategy. That means it should be a business strategy of any organization that you have to take a risk management there. That means every organization needs to manage a risk, like how they plan for a strategy. Risk management also should be a part of strategy. You have to take that into consideration, risk management. Second, ERM. According to ERM's principles, it's everyone's responsibility to manage risk, not just one staff or two staff, with the tone set from the top. That means the top level people, the CEO, the chairman, they should set up that tone from the top to bottom, that they should include everyone in all the levels of the hierarchy, that it should be everyone's job, from the boss to the cleaner in the company, managing risk. Third, creation of a risk aware culture. Make sure that you know this list. This list is going to be very important for you in the exam. Okay, don't write as it is. You need to link this with the scenario given to you, the case study that will be presented to you. Okay, so creation of a risk aware culture. That means you have to create a culture where everyone is aware of a risk. It should not be that you are doing and you don't know what is risk or what risk is all about. Everyone should know what is risk. Fourth, it should be a holistic approach and a very comprehensive approach. Holistic means take it together as a whole big picture, that everyone is playing a part over there, and take it as a big picture. Don't work in isolation. Every department needs to work together to manage the risk. Then it includes broad range of risk, not just one type of risk. What it is, it could be strategic risk, it could be financial, non-financial, compliance. Then a focused risk management strategy has to be there, focused, which is led by the board. Okay, or you can say embedding risk within an organization culture. We are going to go through this in detail in the next lecture. How do you embed risk within a organization? That means it should be a part of your culture, taking care of risk, not just because it's a duty for anyone to do. That means any new staff enters the company, they should be knowing what they should be doing regarding risk. That means it's part of their job as well. Now go through this cube. You don't have to draw this cube in the exam, but you should know what it compromises of. This is some framework matrix. If you see, it has three sides. It has, so these are linked. Okay, so let us start with the one which is shown on the front side of the cube, starting with internal environment. So it starts with internal environment, objective setting, event identification, risk assessment, risk response, control activities, information communication, monitoring. We are going to go in depth what each of this means. So let us start with the internal environment. Internal environment means it is the tone. See, all this you need for risk management, all the parts you need. Starting with internal environment, that means it is your tone of the organization. That means it including the risk management philosophy and risk appetite. What is the risk appetite of the organization? How much risk can they bear? Are they risk seeker? Are they risk taker? Are they scared of taking risk? Are they free to take risk? Are they risk neutral? Okay, and what is their philosophy regarding risk management? Do they even consider risk, or they think it's not so important to take care of risk management? So that is an internal environment. It's like you are setting up a atmosphere of risk management. Second comes objective setting. When you set the objective, it should align with your mission. Okay, and it needs to be consistent with the organization's defined risk appetite. If you say you are a risk taker, that means your objective should be such that it should include that you are taking risk. It should not be the other way around. For example, your objective might be that you do not want to take risk. You want to be a profit satisfier. That means you do not want to increase your profit so much, but your risk appetite says you are a profit seeker. It's the other way around. So it should be aligned. Objective should be aligned with the risk appetite. Third, event identification. Events could be both internal as well as external, or both positive as well as negative. Okay, you need to identify those events which will prevent you from achieving your objective. Fourth, risk assessment. You need to analyze the risk in two axes. One is what is the likelihood, that means probability of it happening. The other one is impact, the intensity, how much it can affect you. Okay, then it's not the end. The fifth element is what? Risk response. Risk response means you can refer this as to TARA model, which we are going to cover in the next lecture as well in depth. It is known as TARA model. Why TARA model? Or you can say SARA. Why? Because it means you can manage risk by this four response you can have. Either you avoid risk, either you accept risk, either you reduce risk, or either you transfer or share. Okay, so this is avoid, accept, reduce, share. If it is this, you can name it as SARA, the short form, the first initial of all these four letters, AARS, so SARA. And if you say share or transfer, the other thing is it could be transfer also, then it is known as TARA model. Okay, very recently they have changed this word to share. From transfer to share, it does not impact so much. The meaning remains the same. It's just the change of the word. So TARA or SARA, whatever it is, this is the model that you use to manage risk. That means your response to risk. Okay. Then we have control activities. What are the policies are there so that you ensure risk responses are effectively carried? That means when you say you're going to accept risk or you're going to avoid the risk, how are you going to avoid the risk? What are the activities you have in your company? What are the control activities? Are you having control in your staff? Are you having the control in your system? What control it is? Then information and communication. Whether the relevant information is identified, captured, communicated, that can enable the people to carry out their responsibilities. And the fourth is monitoring, where you monitor. So you monitor the entire ERM process and modifications made as needed. Wherever you think modifications needed, you do the modification. That's how a normal cycle works, right? You start, you implement, and then you monitor. And you change if it is needed. You don't say it's a rigid plan or you stick with that plan forever. No, you keep on modifying, keep on modifying. This is like a cycle which never ends. Keeps on going, keeps on going. Okay. Now, what are the benefit of this ERM? There are 5 benefits. Number 1, it enhances the decision making by integrating risk. Once you integrate the risk, once you take the risk also into the picture before taking a decision, you can make better decision because now you know what is the risk. If you ignore the risk and take a decision and then suddenly the risk comes upon, you will not be able to deal with it. So it's better to keep it, be proactive rather than react to a situation after it becomes worse. Second, result improvement in investor confidence. Investor confidence goes up because they know the risk has been taken care of. After the consideration of risk, this decision has been taken. Third is focus of management attention on the most significant risk. Management knows what is the most significant risk, so you can focus their attention. Fourth, it is a common language of risk management which is understood throughout the, everyone understands this. It's like a common language. What is less risky, what is most risky, what is risk, everyone knows. Because why? ERM, what do they say? It's a culture. They embed culture. They have a risk aware this thing. Risk is everyone's part. So everyone understands what is risk management now. Not just one or two staff, not in the top level, not in the bottom. Every hierarchy in the level, everyone knows what is risk management. So it's easier for you to communicate and explain. You don't have to explain so much. Everyone knows what is risk management. And the fifth is reduce cost of finance through effective management risk. Once you're able to manage your risk, you can reduce your cost of finance also. Okay, so now before we go on to the next, let us go through a question. Test your understanding one. Test your understanding one. Okay, so rather than reading this entire question, because it's a lengthy one, okay, let me first go through the requirement. In the requirement, you have to basically evaluate the impact of the, how many procedures are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 procedures given on the business. Okay, your answer should include not only impact on the business but your customer, your employee, your company. So this three: customer, employee, and company. These three people, the impact. Basically, the impact means positive and negative. What are the advantages and disadvantages of having these procedures? Okay, so let me give you a little background about it. The background is that it's a fast food retailer. Okay, and currently they are suffering a large increase in a counterfeit $20 and 50 banknotes that they have been receiving from their customer in the different stores. Okay, so because of this, profitability has suffered in different region, and also the ability to meet its financial target. Okay, so what happened? Finance team, they decided that they are going to manage this financial risk by having this 6 procedures. Okay, so the 6 procedures are, one of it is that all banknotes will be tested for authenticity by a detector pin. Second is all 20 banknotes will be tested for authenticity using a UV and a detector pan. Third is no $50 notes will no longer be accepted. Then, sorry, that's the third. And fourth is any counterfeit notes will be will be recovered by the business, that is taken by the individual who is working on the till. Okay. Fifth, any suspected counterfeit notes will be confiscated by the store supervisor and it will be handed over to the police. Okay. Then any store employee who does not follow this procedure, they will be facing disciplinary action and also dismissal from the company. Okay, so now you have gone through the 6 procedure all together. If you see the answer, it is like given like this: the 4 advantages versus the 6 or 7 disadvantages. Advantages are less than disadvantages, but first we'll go through the advantages. Okay, first advantages is if they are confiscated, right? What will happen? Profitability will increase. Okay, because it is likely that the number of the counterfeit banknotes taken by the stores throughout the country will decrease. Advantages is that, isn't it? Through all this, what happens? The counterfeit banknotes will decrease. So because of this, profitability will increase. It's a good thing. Second is you can hit any KPIs, the finance team. Okay, that is relating to what? Counterfeit notes. For example, any store in anywhere in the region, if they can hit the highest number of counterfeit notes that they have confiscated, they can hit any KPI, key performance indicator. Third advantages are goodwill. There will be a goodwill between the police and the company. It's good for the company. Okay. Finance team is for the staff. And for the customer, a positive impact on customer goodwill as well. Why? Because customers know that this company is taking a stand against the crime, that they are not accepting counterfeit banknotes. Disadvantages, on the other hand, are what? See, because they're in the fast food business, doing all this confiscated, checking 50-20 notes, detecting, won't you think the service will slow down? Because it's a fast food business, you have to be on the track, but it will slow down your the speed of the service. It will slow down your speed of service. So you cannot, so you are going to reduce a core KPI. Your KPI, key performance indicator, one of the critical success factor for a fast food restaurant is in the speed of the service. All the McDonald's, KFC people know this, all right? Second, goodwill with customer. The impact on the customer is the goodwill with customer. Adversely affected. Who wants to wait? No one will wait more than 5 minutes for a McDonald's burger. No one. Max 5 minutes. Any item which takes more than 5 minutes, they don't even serve it. And if it takes more than 5 minutes, the customer is lost. You are going to lose a customer. Third, employees. Think about the employees. They are going to be put in a difficult confrontational situations. Why? Because they have to ask the customer that we are going to check you. They're like basically a company police. They're like checking which customer will like them to get confiscated or be checked by the employees all the time for the counterfeit notes, right? Also, they will be demotivated. Employees will be demotivated because they know if they do not follow the rules, breach, they are going to dismiss. They're going to get dismissed. Human resource will face another increased workload if employees are applying or not applying the procedure that they have to check. Operation of the store may be affected. Why? Because if staff are facing disciplinary action, that means a lot of the staff will be out of the business. That means there will be a shortage of the staff. And finally, recruiting staff will become very difficult, especially when they know this company has a high staff turnover rate. A lot of staff are leaving. Okay? Why would they want to join in a company which is having such a rigid procedure? They will join their competitor instead, isn't it? So that's it. So now, strategic and operational risk. What is strategic risk? Strategic by the nature, okay, that it is long term, something which is very important, very significant. So here it arises from the consequences of taking a strategic decisions. Okay. Number two, it can also arise from the way that organization is strategically positioned within its environment. Okay, for example, you might have positioned it wrongly. Okay. And third, it should be identified and assessed at a senior management and board or director level. Strategic risk cannot be managed by middle level or the lower level staff. It should be managed by someone at the top level because the strategic, its nature is very much important. The nature of the risk is very significant. It's very material risk. So it needs to be assessed, identified and assessed by the senior level staff like senior management or the board of directors. And which techniques can you use to identify the strategic risk? One is PESTEL, one is what we covered both this in our previous lectures when we were going through the strategy, like strategic position. Okay. Now, next category of risk is operational risk. You will often face this in your exam, strategic operation, strategic operation. So you need to identify, and they will not give you that this is a strategic or operation. In the exam, in the scenario, they might give a list of risk. You have to identify and categorize correctly whether it's a strategic or operation. How do you do that? You see for a particular nature. First, you see the industry what you are given. Then you see the nature of the risk. Is it a long term? Is it something that has to be done by the top level people who is taking this risk, or is it affecting day to day? You see those things. These things will help you as a hint whether it's operational or strategic risk. Now, operational risk is which arises from the losses in the business operation. Second, maybe like fraud. Because of fraud some risk happen, or employee malfeasance, or poor quality of production, or lack of inputs for production. Anything it could be. It normally affects day-to-day activity. From anything which is happening from day-to-day activity, lack of anything, it is operational risk. Can be managed by internal controls. This type of risk you do not need the board or the director. You can yourself manage it through internal control system. You can have a strong internal control system in the organization. Another way of checking whether it is strategic or operational, see, is it affected, like can internal control system solve this risk? For example, if it's a poor quality, yes. If it's a lack of input or production, yes. But some strategic level risk which cannot be solved by internal control system needs to be solved by the board and all. Okay, so before we move on to the next, let us like business risk, let us do test understanding two to identify clearly between operational and strategic risk. Test your understanding too. Here you have to identify examples of strategic as well as operational risk that is facing a telecommunication company. Think about telecommunication company, what type of risk could be. This type of questions are very good for your SBL exam because you can think from a specific company's point of view. Okay, what is a strategic and operational risk? Let us go. You might be having more than this or different answers than this. It's quite okay, it's normal. You might be right. Okay, but let us go through this. Strategic risk, which is something affecting in a bigger term, which might affect the objective that you want to achieve. Something does not happen in day-to-day activity. Something which is external, you can take from the external environment the changes risk comes, that is strategic in nature. For example, failure of strategic partner. In a telecommunication industry, you need a strategic partner. You need a partner without whom you cannot survive in the telecommunication industry. Any telecommunication industry you take, if they fail, you fail. Second, competitors. You see, it's something outside. You cannot take care of them. Competitors, they might come up with more technological advances than you. Major corporate customer is also not your control. They might decide to discontinue your contract. Then a competitor again launches a price war for a broadband supply. They might reduce their price. They might give attractive packages and all. Operational risk, on the other hand, is something due to your failure, something you can work on, something you have a control over inside the organization day to day, which happens like poor service quality. Who is to be blamed? The customer, the competitor? No. The external environment? No. The quality is suffering us because of you. Poor quality. Why are you giving the service poor quality? You can work on the quality. Service outrages. Something you can work because it's your service you are giving. Network fraud. Make sure it's not fraud. Inaccurate billing. You can work on that. Unauthorized system changes. So these are the operational risk for a telecommunication industry. Now be very careful when you're answering operational and strategic risk. Changes from company to company. If I tell you for an education industry, what is a strategic risk and operational risk, answer changes completely. Completely the answer will change. So don't write the same answer for all the type of industry. Okay. So now let us go through the business risk. Okay. These are the types of business risk. There are many. Starting with number one, market risk. What is market risk? It is like a risk that is derived from the sector that you're working in. Okay. For example, if you're in a manufacture sector, now because manufacture has declined and people are moving to the service sector, so manufacturer sector is in decline. That is a type example of market risk. Risk that comes from a particular sector. Next type of risk is product risk. Maybe customers are not buying your product. Maybe the demand for the product went down. Okay. Anything could be. These are examples of product risk. Anything relating to product. By the name of the risk, you know what it affects. So it's easy for me to explain also. And I can quickly go through this list. Third, commodity price risk. It is relating to prices of commodity. Maybe unexpectedly the prices went up or went down for a commodity price. Maybe let's say oil, fuel, rice. No. So if it's a fuel, petrol, it affects the market, right? Product reputation risk. Maybe for those companies that rely heavily on that brand image of their product. Okay. Where if anything happens, any event occurs, maybe bad publicity about it, or the product actually affected customers, okay, it will affect the product reputation and also future sales. Then we have credit risk. That means the risk of paying late or maybe not paying at all from the customer. Customers are not able to pay or they are not paying at all, either late payment or either non-payment. Then we have currency risk. This is regarding your foreign exchange, where the exchange rates might go in your favor or against. So if it goes against, it's a currency risk. Interest rate risk, where interest rate might go up and down. So you might get unexpected gain or losses. Political risk, where political risk might be where the politics like the government might not be stable, corruptions are there, briberies are accepted. So these are examples of political risk. Legal or litigation risk. This there might be possibility of legal action against the company. Okay. Then we have regulatory risk. That means if regulators they put some rules and regulations which needs to be followed, which might hamper the organization. Compliance risk, where organizations fail to comply with certain rules, which might lose them for like, which can lead them to fines or losses or even reputation risk. Technology risk, when the technology changes and you are left behind. Economic risk, changes from economics conditions like taxation, government policy, spending policy. Government decide not to spend on infrastructure, roads, buildings, or taxation. Government decided to increase the tax. Unemployment level, international trading conditions, growth, recession. These are economic risks, something to do with economic, macroeconomic. Environmental risk, related to environment, pollution, right? If you are having a factory near the water, it affects the water, air pollution, noise pollution. You are restricting the supply of the natural resources. So environment. And then we have health and safety risk, where companies might engage in certain activities which are very injurious for health. They might have long-term impact, sometimes even loss of life. One example is coal mining, farming. These are very dangerous activity. One can mitigate this risk by taking safety precautions like helmet they can wear, right? Then we have, remember, for all this risk you should know precautions also. Okay. Climate risk, climate change, because of climate change. For example, extreme weather conditions like cyclone, drought, flood, fire, okay, things like that. Then business property risk. This is relating to the ethics and the governance. Maybe you're unethical. Derivatives risk relating to the financial instruments. See, financial instruments is very risky, okay, very risky. There are so many numerous examples of fraud which happen mostly in this area, derivative risk. Okay, this is one of the major area where risk is the greatest. Anyone can do fraud. Why? Because that area is very complex. Financial instruments are very complex area for one to understand, for one to explain to the others also. So easily you can manipulate there. Okay. Entrepreneurial risk. This is the necessary risk associated. See, entrepreneurship means when you start up a business, when you are an entrepreneur, some risk you cannot just, it will come along. It's an inherent risk, it will be there. No matter what you do, it will not go. Risk is there. You, as an entrepreneur, taking a risk is a risk itself. So, these are necessary risk. Then we have financial risk. Financial risk is something which is very easy to explain in terms of money. One of the major causes of business risk is financial risk. But this can be further defined as what? Into two categories. One is gearing, one is liquidity. Gearing risk is, okay, that means you are having high gearing, high debt. Your debt is so high that now you have to pay more interest. You have borrowed so much, you have to pay interest on that as well as the principal amount. Then we have liquidity risk. This two risk makes up your financial risk. Okay. When they're talking about financial risk means they're talking about gearing and liquidity risk. Sometimes you might have to do calculation and show them the gearing ratio and the liquidity ratio. Okay. So liquidity risk is when companies are unable to pay cash. Okay, because maybe their cash inflow, not maybe it is, cash inflows are less than their cash outflows. Okay, so before we go on to the next topic, let us do test understanding 3 very quickly. Test your understanding 3. Now this is a big lengthy question. This is good in terms of your exam preparation for SBL, because in SBL you are going to go through a long passage and the hardest thing is how to retain the information. Okay, for that you have to do a bit hard work. You have to read, and once you read a paragraph you have to note like what are the key things you need to highlight, or you need to write it down somewhere. You need to do these things. Okay, just doing reading and not stopping anywhere, not highlighting keywords, not will not help you in SBL. You need to do that. Highlighters are there online in the CV platform you're doing now, so you don't have to carry a highlighter any longer, but it's everything is there on your platform. You just need to make sure that you know how to use it. You have note scratch pad, or you can write it there, right? So let's start. This is regarding an aircraft. Okay, the sector is aircraft. They are facing many types of risk. Okay, and how? So the requirement is you first have to identify, and then you have to explain also the sources of business risk that they could affect the company. Okay, Once you have evaluated the impact of the risk on this one, you have to discuss how the risk can be mitigated. So just showing the impact of the risk is not enough. How you can reduce the risk, mitigate the risk also you have to tell. Okay, so let us read this. They manufacture aircraft. In fact, they produce a range of 4 different aircraft. They are based in Europe, the company. Okay, they are reliable with low maintenance cost. It gives them a good reputation. Okay, now they are currently developing a next generation of passenger aircraft. Okay, what is the name? That is known as ZX Liner. So these are the new developments that they are going to do. Okay, majority of your answer is from these new developments. So let us read this. First one is they are going to have a two deck. Two deck means they can do the loading and unloading using both the decks at the same time. This will enable them to do it faster. Okay, but remember, this means that airport gate must be improved too, so that they can facilitate the dual loading at a considerable expense. You need an expense for doing a dual loading. Second, there's a 20% deduction in the fuel requirements and also fall in noise and pollution level. Immediately when you do this, write the name of the risk that comes into your mind. Business risk. What are the business risks that we just went through? All the type of risk. Business risk, the product risk, property risk, um, technology risk, environmental risk, health and safety risk, all those risks. So if you think about this noise and pollution, what types of risk comes to you? Environmental. So immediately you can do like this is called annotation. Immediately you write next to it the type of risk that you can think of. You understanding? Then the third, use of new alloys to decrease their maintenance cost, increase safety, and use of ZITNIM. Okay, it is a lightweight conducting alloy rather than the standard wiring. Okay, so ZITNIM has only one supplier worldwide. Highlight keywords like this. You need this in your answer. You need, in fact, the reference with the whole case study you need in your answer when you are writing the risk, remember, not the definition of the risk. Many component suppliers are based in Europe and they obtain 25% from subcontract in USA. At present, it is relatively weak, the exchange rate. What comes to your mind the moment you read exchange rate? It's an exchange rate risk. So you write exchange rate risk in this paragraph. Okay, I'm just showing it's not very clear. ZXC maintains a significant R&D department working on the ZX liner and also other new products. As an alternative environmentally friendly fuel for aircraft, what risk comes? Environment risk, correct? But at present they are weak, so this means the risk is currently negligible. That means current service they are talking about, although they yet to fly or be granted airworthiness certificate. Yet to be granted, they are not yet granted and they didn't fly also. They have order for 25 aircraft from HTS company, and currently they are testing schedules for this. Okay, and it will be delivered late. Another risk. Currently they have 4 billion of loans from various banks, and last year they made a loss of 2.3 billion. This itself shows that they are in a huge financial risk. Okay, also the chief executive resigned, leaving a bonus around 2 years salary. They have taken a bonus and they left, which is 2 years salary. Okay, so now if you see the list, all the type of risks that we just went through are here. But when you write different types of risk, make sure that you put a separate subheading, and under the subheading you explain, again subheading, again explain. Risk has to be explained in different paragraphs with using subheadings, the name of the risk, because you have to identify, explain. So you start product market risk. Okay, this the first para is always the explanation that we just went through. No need, don't explain directly, just go here. This is what you need. The last para of your this thing you need. That's it, because that is they are linking to the case study. So now always when you refer to the company, you can refer the name of the company. Always refer the name of the company. For this company, for so for so this is the risk, for so this is the risk. This is how you mitigate using this, and don't write too much of mitigation things. Okay, writing one or two is enough. One is enough. if you have too many risks to write. If you have less risk, maybe 2 3 risks you're talking about, there you can expand your answer and write more depending on the amount of the marks that you're being given. If you are given 6 marks, 2 risk, 3 3, 3 points for this, 3 points for that. Okay, so here there's no marks, but they have given all the list. We'll see. Product market risk means what? Product means the aircraft. Maybe the demand for the aircraft might be less than expected. Is it? Isn't it? They might go to their rivals. Okay, or maybe airports might not be adapted to take the new this thing. So because of that, product, that means product. What is the product here? The demand for the aircraft, new aircraft might reduce than expected, might be less than expected. It's a risk. Coming to the commodity price risk. Commodity price is to do with the raw materials. So regarding the raw, what do you need? This is regarding ZX liner we are talking about. So for that, which commodity are we using? The ZNIM. Okay, and this set name, why it is so much of risk? Because you are taking only from one supplier, and he might be a monopoly also. There's a danger of monopolist. So if he becomes a monopoly, remember, he can increase the price or he might deny the supply also. In both cases, it is affecting you. If price increases, overall cost will increase. If they deny the supply, you will be delivering it late, the aircraft. So what? How can they mitigate this risk? Okay, remember, some risk you cannot mitigate if it's outside your control. Like for this one, if you say product market risk, can they mitigate? No. Why? It is because it is based on demand for the product. How can you control the demand for the new aircraft? How can you control the customer? You cannot have a say over there. But commodity price risk is something you can do by changing the supplier, cutting down the. But in this case, because it is only one supplier, you cannot say switch supplier, go for cheaper supplier, go for better quality supplier. You see how answers changes based on the case study. Only one supplier. What should you do with that one supplier? And that one supplier is very critical for your commodity. You have to maintain good relationships. You have to maintain good relationship to mitigate the risk, because he is the key supplier. This is how you mitigate, because you have to give a problem mitigation. Okay, product reputation risk, and always keep the pattern of your answers similar from each point, each type of risk, so that examiners know, okay, this is the mitigation, this is a risk, this is the mitigation, this is a risk. Coming to product reputation risk. Okay, how can the reputation of the company get suffered? At present it's good, right? Isn't it? Present it's good. But if this ZX is delayed significantly, or they do not perform well in the test flight, okay, still it has to be arranged. Still it was not arranged. Reputation will suffer. Also, the airline customer, as well as their customers that are travelers, they might feel unlikely. They might not feel comfortable flying in an aircraft that is unstable. Reputation. How can you mitigate this risk? They are still continuing to invest in R&D and good quality control to mitigate this risk, to mitigate the effect of this risk, reputation risk. Coming to the credit risk. What do you do with the credit risk? Do they have credit risk? See, sometimes a risk might not be present in the organization. You have to look for, just because you are listing the risk does not mean all the risks are there. Currently, this they have not been sold at present, so there are no data. That means there is no credit risk for this company. But remember, the company is heavily dependent on bank finance. They have taken loans. So if the loan has been denied, it can affect their ability to continue to trade. So credit risk is therefore significant at present. Maybe not from the customer, but yes, they're dependent on the bank finance. So like that, it's significant. Can they mitigate this risk? Not currently, because they need the bank to support them. They cannot say cut on the bank, take equity finance. They cannot say like that. That's why mitigation risk has not been explained in some parts. Coming to the currency risk. Here, they have told that it's negligible. That's why you're writing negligible, or you're explaining. You need to explain the point. Okay. They are based in Europe. Okay. Even though significant part has been obtained from US, exchange rate is worse. What does it mean? The imported goods from ZXC will increase. But at present, the relative the currency is weak. That means it is in the company's favor. So in the company's favor means risk is not so much. Negligible. You can neglect the risk. Coming to the interest rate risk. Yes, this risk will be high or less. They have significant bank loans. Whenever we talk about credit risk and interest rate risk, remember bank loans. When they have debt, these two risks will be high. So definitely if they have bank loans means if interest goes up and down, interest risk is high. That means what should they do? What should they do as a hedging? Use another hedging method to hedge your risk. Coming to the gearing risk. Gearing risk also will be high or less. It will be high. They have taken a huge amount of loan, huge amount of borrowing. Okay, significant. See, company has significant amount of bank loans. Write this first before saying risk is high or less. Because of bank loan, what happens? Interest that you have to pay has to be repaid increases each year. So, in short, they cannot affect this risk as the bank loans are necessary part of its operation. You cannot mitigate this risk currently. You have to go by the bank loan. You have to keep on giving interest because it's a necessary part for you to operate. Huge amount of loan you have taken. Coming to political risk. Currently, is there any risk? No. They have a politically stable country, so this risk is also negligible. Okay. Coming to legal risk or litigation risk. This also, there is no thread from this risk. But if you delay or there's a breach of contract for late delivery to HTC, then yes, then you might have to face legal cases and all if you're breaching a law. But there is little that they can do to guard against this risk, apart from keeping them abreast of the delays involved with this one. Very little you can do because legal thing is something which you cannot help it. If you are delayed, you are delayed. Regulatory risk. This is what regulation what regarding which affects noise and pollution, but they told it's going to keep it in a lower noise and pollution. They are going to design this in such a way. So currently this also is not a threat to the company. See, remember when a risk does not exist or even if it exists is very less, negligible, does not affect the company, don't write a mitigation tool strategy for that. Mitigation is only for high risk. Okay, coming to technology risk. Can technology risk what technology risk? See, to produce that, aren't you are using a new product, okay, that has not actually been tested also. So there is some technology risk is there because I've not tested it yet. At worst, what could happen? X, sorry, ZX liner may not fly at all, or they might not even get the flying certificate also. Okay. So how are they guarding against this risk? By not decreasing its investment in product development. That means they are keeping on investing in product development. They are not decreasing it there. Then we are coming to the economic risk. Okay. What is this risk? Again, regarding demand for air travel. Okay, there is economic risk, demand for air travel. It is forecasted that it will increase in the foreseeable future because more and more people will keep on traveling, right? So this is likely to be beneficial for them. Okay, so there is no such risk. Environmental risk. Currently, environmental risk we have highlighted also and noted also they are subject to this risk even at a greater level because air travel and all consumes a lot of global warming, air pollution and all. Okay, at extreme what can happen? They might be banned also the air travel or they might be made very expensive by the international taxation agreements. But unlikely, they might not ban or made it very expensive. Does not look like. So but they have to continue to monitor this risk, remember. And also at the same time continue to research into alternative fuels. Okay, so that they can mitigate the risk. Business probity, the last risk that we are going through. What is business? Legal, ethical. So chief executive left with the 2 years salary as a bonus. Is it ethical? Do you think so? It's not. It is against business property. That means unethical. Why? They are taking a bonus when the company is making a loss and also workers are made redundant. Is it fair? So we don't know the impact of this risk, but is it fair? That's the thing. But remember, even if it's fair or not, this is unlikely to affect sales. You have to understand this. Sales to the customer is not likely to get affected by this. Do customers care whether who is leaving and chief executive is leaving with the bonus or not? No, right? They're more interested in their ZX liner departure. That has to depart at the correct time, not the chief executive leaving or taking bonus with them. That is the point from the point of the company. Yes, that's a risk. Okay. Also, this risk will bring other risks, such as property risk not being followed in other areas. Business property. That means you are not being legal in other areas also, like perceived cost cutting in research and development, affecting the quality of the product. Again, ZXC are guarding against this risk. Okay, what is the mitigation you can give for the business property? The remuneration committee, what can they do of the company? They review the director's service contract to ensure that risk in this area does not occur in the future. That means because they left after 2 years, right, with the bonus, make sure what is the service contract for the director so that they are not able to leave just like this. Okay, so that's it for test understanding 3. Now let us go to the categories and the risk relationship. Now there are 4 stages of audit risk. Okay, starting with identify, assess, review, report. Okay, so starting with assessment. Okay, identify, I didn't explain because you just identify the risk. You just name the list and after that you do the assessment. How do you do the assessment? You put it in the matrix or you measure them against 2 variables. What are the 2 variables? One is known as probability, or you can say a likelihood. The other one is the impact. If the risk is realized, what would happen? Okay, and this two intersecting contonia can be used to create a probability impact grid on which individual risk can be plotted. So you plot risk on this two matrix, impact and the probability. Review stage, what do? The auditor analyzes the control that organization has in the event of risk materializing. Review can represent a substantial task. So one of the major tasks is in this stage, not in identifying, not in assessing, not even reporting. Also, review stage is one of the hardest, challenging, and this stage needs more time. It's very substantial area. Okay, so review can represent a substantial task as response to each assessed risk. Whatever risk you have assessed, now you have to respond. Respond means what? Are you going to accept? Are you going to transfer? Remember, here if you go wrong, things might become more worse later on. For example, some risk which is high in nature, you might have to avoid, or you might have to transfer your accepting the risk. Wrong strategy. So this stage you need to be very careful. The response that you're giving for each assessed risk. Then comes a report. In the report, what do? Report is just the final outcome. You whatever you have done the review, you just submit it to the board of organization. Okay. And management will probably want to know about the extent of the key risk. Managers, they want to know what is the extent of those key risks. What are the key risks? Key risks are those risks which has high probability as well as high impact. They are key risk, very important risk you need to deal with. Okay. And also they want to know the quality of the assessment and the effectiveness of the control. How effective the control is in identifying this or in trying to minimize the impact of this. Okay, because if there is an ineffective control, remember that has to be mentioned in the report that controls are ineffective. It's a key component of the report, in fact. Okay, because this is subject to urgent management attention. It is something which you cannot neglect. That saying, okay, controls are ineffective, we'll take care of it after 1 year. No, just something, clearly something needs to be done very urgently. Then we are moving on to 2 types of risk. Categorized risk, either they are generic or specific. Generic, by the word, it is general for all. Specific, individual. So examples of generic risks are what? Like interest rate. Interest rate, does it affect all companies? Yes, it does. Non-compliance with company law, does it affect any type of organization? Yes, it does. Whether it's a bank, whether it's an entertainment industry, whether it's a non-public company, it affects all. Or a poor use of derivative instruments. Okay, generic risk can affect different business in different ways. See, just because it's generic risk or generic risk does not mean it affects all the business in the same way. Some has more impact of a particular risk. If you are in a banking industry, lending, borrowing, industry, financial industry. Changes in the interest rate will affect you more than if you are in a service industry giving services on the internet. You understanding? Impact might be different, but yes, it affects. Okay. Then a company manufacturing computers. Another example to understand. Company manufacturing computers will be more at a risk from the possibility of changes in legislation that affects VDOs, visual display unit, isn't it? Because you are the one who's manufacturing these videos. So if any rules or legislation change regarding videos, it will affect the computer manufacturing companies more than those who are providing legal services. It will affect legal services as well, but more for the computer manufacturing companies. So don't ask the question more or less. The question is whether it affects all industry or not. If it affects all industry, generic risk. If not, specific risk. That's how you identify in the exam also. I'm explaining you here itself how to identify in the exam. Concept of related risk. The other one is known as related risk, where risks are related. Two risks or three risks are related to each other. How? Correlation. You must have heard about correlation, where one affects the other. It could be in the same direction, it could be in the opposite direction. If it's in the same direction, one increases, the other increases, one falls, the other falls. It is known as positive correlation, or you can say positively correlated risk. Where one risk increases, it automatically increases the other risk. If one risk falls, automatically the other risk falls down. The other term is known as negatively correlated or negative correlation. Negative means one increases, other falls down, one decreases, other increases. Relationship is opposite. Okay, we have examples. Example of positively correlated. Let's take a Deepwater Horizon oil spill, which happened in 2010. What happened? It had a massive environmental impact, isn't it? Why? Because it not only affected the company but also affected the BP's reputation, but British Petroleum's reputation severely. So, what type of this thing is there? This relationship is a positive. Why? Because you have an environmental risk, it increased, with it reputation risk also increased. Next type of example is for negative correlation, that is of again BP. Okay, so BP, what do they did? They spend more money, so the risk of environmental damage goes down. But what happened? Your financial risk increased. Why? Because you are running out of cash. You need cash to limit the risk of environmental damage. So because of that, you will run short of cash reserve. So your financial risk is increasing. Environmental risk is falling down. Financial risk is increasing. Same example. You see, negative correlation. Now, so before going, the next is the impact on the stakeholders. Before going to that, let us do test your understanding 4. Test your understanding 4. Identify 5 examples of sector specific risk that affects a university. So you have to identify. When they say identify, make sure that you do not explain. Okay, you just write the risk, the name of the sector specific risk. That means only that can affect a university, not any other sector. Okay, so starting with this, what could be this thing? Maybe inability to attract good quality staff, as academic salaries fall below those in business, right? Because you might not be able to give them the salary. So ability to attract good quality staff in a university. How does a university run? Because it has a best facility, the best course, you need staff, you need lecturers, right? Without good lecturers, a university will not run. So inability to attract is a risk, which is for the university specifically. Second, a major private university established that is attractive to typical applicants to these university. This also could be a sector specific risk. Okay, maybe somewhere they must have opened up a major private university that is now against, that is more attractive than your university. So what happens? Students will be applying there, they'll be going there. Third, major income threatened by poor financial position of donors to major projects. You need research income and all, right? Universities and all, mostly they need this research income and all. So this can be threatened by poor financial position of donors to major projects. Okay, maybe the donor's financial position is poor. So if they are not willing to give to the major projects, research income is going to get threatened. Fourth, admission policy that is going in the university might be viewed as discriminatory. They might think that they are discriminating based on race, gender, or nationality, or academic results, or whatever. And fifth is the government policy for funding further education is diverted in favor of other types of institution rather than university. So this could be a sector specific risk for university. Okay. Let us go through the impact on the stakeholders of the risk. Okay. Number one is the shareholders. So what could be the impact of the business risk on the shareholder? They will lose the investment in a company, for like fall in share price, and also the loss of income because their dividends will be reduced. Next is directors, and their risk impact could be they might lose income. For example, the remuneration that is linked with the company's performance. Why? Because if you're having high business risk, your performance will suffer. For performance suffers means some form of remuneration like bonuses and all, directors are going to lose. And also your reputation. Why? If it is proven that directors are also involved in the certain actions for the okay, so it affects the reputation of the directors in the business risk. Then we have the managers, likely to mean that department they are in charge of falls behind budget in some way. So if they are in charge of that business risk that has impacted, maybe the managers are the one who told that an acquisition is to be done, which is a bad strategy. Okay, what happens? They are going to lose some of the budget because already they have spent so much for the acquisition. So now they're going to lose the budget. Because of this, what happens? Managers are going to get demotivated, especially when they know that they are not to be blamed for the business risk. Okay, or maybe same like directors falling in remuneration if part of their salary is relating to performance related. Then we have employees. It's very easy. Similar to manager. Fall in remuneration if it's not their fault, they will get demotivated. Customer. This depends on the nature of the risk actually, the impact on the customer. For example, if it's a poor product reputation, what happens? The impact on the customer is that company products will not be purchased by that customer. If it is uh, involved in certain actions, maybe let's say the product is not sustainable, it is consuming so much of energy, it is leading to pollution. Okay, since customers are becoming green now, they might not purchase that product if they are not CSR, corporate social responsibility. Overall impact is negative. Okay, so the impact on the company is overall it's negative, whatever the customers do, because most probably they will not buy only. So company is going to lose on sales and also the reputation of the company. Trade unions, loss of jobs for them. Okay, it affects their status, their power. Then we have supplier. Okay, for them, if the business risk results from the poor quality of supplies, what happens? What is the impact of that risk on them? Loss of supply. They might not be able to supply to that particular company. So if the supply is lost, you lost the supply to someone else. What happens? And especially if you're not to be blamed, what happens? The purchasing company manufacture fewer items, okay, decreasing the amount of input purchased. So the one who's going to purchase from the supplier, they're going to reduce their amount of purchase, like the quantity of the amount that they're going to purchase, and also amount of input that they have purchased. Suppliers are going to lose on their income from the businesses to whom they supply. Government, main loss for them is the loss in the revenue from their tax or corporation sales tax or corporation tax. Because if company is having a risk, higher risk means less profit. Less profit means government is going to get less tax. Banks, for them, what is it? The risk could be that their interests are not paid. Their loans and interest might not be paid because the company is now bankrupt. They are no longer trading. So what happens? But sometimes impacts may be less severe also. Depends on the company's profitability or ability to repay. Sometimes they are making loss, but they have still profitability, or they have the ability to repay. Maybe they have income from other sources that is running. Okay. So what happens? In other words, the risk assessment of the company increases, limiting the amount of money the bank is willing to. So this increases the risk for the company. If they are unable to pay, bank will not pay them much. Bank will limit. And communities. If the local community are the provider of the majority of the workforce, see, through your local community only you get majority of the workforce that you need. Okay. If there's a risk, they will be affected by any job losses. That workforce, the community. Especially if the organization is not operating in line with the local community. Okay. Next is assessing a risk. So from impact on the stakeholder, we are moving towards assessing risk now. How do you assess risk? There's a tool that we use, and make sure that you know this tool. You might have to draw this tool in the exam sometimes. So it's a qualitative way of assessing significant risk is to produce a risk map or heat map. We'll see what is a heat map. Okay, risk map. You can take this. Okay, so this is what a risk map looks like. It's like a map. You plot risk into out of the 4 quadrant: low, low, high, high. In fact, in your ACCA syllabus, especially in SBL, the models that you go through, most of the time you will see this 4 quadrant models like this only, where 4 quadrants are there: low, low, high, high. So we'll go through the likelihood and the consequences. Consequences on y-axis, likelihood on the x-axis. Okay. So when both are low, low, when both are high, high, when one is high, one is low, the other one is low, and what do you do? Okay. So this is the model. How we are going to react, how we are going to put, are we going to accept, we are going to reduce, we are going to transfer, or we are going to avoid the risk, will be explained in the next lecture in detail. Okay, because this lecture is just for assessing and identifying risk. How do you manage the risk, how do you respond to the risk is in the next lecture. That is the next part. So it's not explained in this lecture. Now this, go through this. You can assess your risk in this way also. Likelihood like this, and potential impact. Rather than putting high low a figure, you can put it like this, where potential impact you can label as negligible, low, medium, high, extreme. That means impact. Negligible means not so, the extremes. Okay, not so, you can just neglect, the impact is not so much. Extreme impact is so heavy. Likelihood starting from remote, unlikely, possible, likely, probable. Okay, remote means it's very far, not any chances of it happening, and probable is it has a very high chance of happening. Okay, and ranges are given in terms of percentage. For example, 0 to 10, 10 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 90, 90 to 100%. Okay, don't worry about these numbers and all, it's not so much important right now. Okay, and you don't have to use color pencils and on anything. Okay, this now will be done on the Excel for you. I mean, you can do it on a CV platform. You don't have to draw it any longer and color it, nothing like that. Now, so the risk management strategy that will be adopted, whatever the strategy you're going to do, depends on how the risk is assessed on the map, whether it is in the high high category, high high, or low low. Depends on that, you will see. So these are the 4 strategies. Transfer, another word for transfer is, you can say, share also. Accept, reduce, avoid, which I labeled as Tara model. So either you transfer the risk, either you accept the risk, either you reduce the risk, or you avoid the risk. So let's go through this. This is given from an example. The example I didn't include here, but it's an airline restaurant. Airline industry. Okay, what is the risk? What is the probability of the risk and the impact of that risk? So I will be explaining that through this only. As I told you, I have reduced. I have not included all the explanation what they have done. I have just included what is very important for you guys, so that you can just quickly skim through this lecture. Okay, it's nothing. It's very easy. So let us start with which axis you want to start. Let's start with high high. Okay, where probability is high, impact is high. What type of risk could be this for an airline industry? Sorry, high low. Probability is high, impact is low. Higher airline flight cost. Flight cost could be this thing. Okay, for this, because probability is very likely. Why? There are so many flights. There are so many flights. So if this increases, flight cost increases. Okay, customers will switch to the competitor. So probability is very high of this risk happening. Flight cost can go up, right? Probability of it's happening, like ticket prices going up is high. Impact is low. Why? See, for this, there was a case study given which I didn't include, but the impact is low because they do not have so much of, what do I say, Friday airlines. So that's the reason. Coming to next, come down, where impact is low but probability is also low. A major airline will go out of business. See, airline going out of business is not an easy thing. That to a major airline. They usually do not go very quickly like that. When they exit the market, it takes time. So that's why the probability of this happening is low. Also, the impact is low. Even if they go out, the impact is low for the current airline. Understanding? So it takes time. Okay. It's not that airline comes today and they are out of the market tomorrow. It's not a small shop, coffee shop or something like that. Then where both are high, insufficient freight to fill containers. Yes, probability of this happening could be high. It is high because they are running out of this thing capacity. They're short of capacity. In the case study they have explained, I did include it. And the impact of this is also very high for them because they're going to lose a lot of customers, a lot of revenues from it. There are revenues from this freight. So if they are unable to fill the containers, probability is high. The impact is very high. They're going to lose. And then probability is high. The impact is high. Probability is low. Downturn in international trade. Impact is very high if international trade stops, but probabilities of this happening is low. Okay, it is according to the case study. So now before we go on to the next topic, we'll go through test your understanding 5. Test your understanding 5. Suggest a map, suggest a risk that could be included in each quadrant of a risk map for an accountancy tuition company. So you are in a risk map for an accountancy tuition company. Okay, you can take ACCA as an example because that is also an accountancy company, right? So you are just told to list and there is a map. That's it. No explanation is required, nothing. So this is that low impact and likelihood. Low, low, high, high, low, high, high, low. So we'll start with the, you can start with any quadrant. Okay, let us start with this. Where impact is low, that is this one, and likelihood is high. What could be that? ACCA changed their syllabus. Isn't the likelihood of ACCA changing syllabus is high? We all know they every year they change their syllabus. Okay, but impact is very low of that change. Why? Because they do not drastically change the syllabus. Major of the content is similar with little changes, so impact is less. Coming to the other, where impact is high, likelihood is also high. It's here. Company loses key tuition staff. Why? Because your ACCA runs on what do you need for an ACCA to run and produce people to make students pass ACCA? Whether it's a good books, textbooks, the exam style, the exam center, what do you need? Stuff. Key resources, what? Key thing is what? What do you look for when you register for an ACCA? You must be knowing it better. That's why you're watching my video here right now on my ACCA channel. You need a lecturer. You need a good ACCA lecturer, not just good, beyond good. Excellent. So though they are the key, their likelihood if if you are going to lose this key stuff, the likelihood of losing is very high, isn't it? They can keep changing, they can go to other firms. Also, the impact is very high. If you do not have a good lecturer, we know the how difficult it's for a student to pass ACCA. Yes, you might do self-study and all, but we know the impact is very high. Because for ACCA, the most is the stuff. You might anyhow pass without the textbook and anything, the resources and all. But if you have a good teacher, you definitely are going to pass. Okay. So impact is high, this is high. By the way, that does not mean that I'm promoting only this thing. You definitely have to do questions. Okay. Okay, so next is we are going down where impact is low, likelihood is also low, which will not affect so much for an accountancy tuition company. This one, material increase significantly in price. Will you care? you still will buy, right? Likelihood of this happening is very low, because it will not significantly, they will not increase the price. Impact is also very low. Even if they increase, will the students stop purchasing it? The textbook and the revision kit and all, they still will purchase, because what do they want? They want to pass the ACCA exam. So impact is low. Next, impact is high, likelihood is low. ACCA scrap their examination qualification. Impact is very high. Why? You are tested based on those examination qualification. You are going to get certificate based on those examination qualification. If they are not there, how can you be? How can a company or your employer verify that you're an ACCA affiliate based on your examination qualification? Impact is high. It has a value. But what about the likelihood? It's low. Are they going to scrap it? Even if they do, impact likelihood currently it's low, right? Are they going to know? Not in the near future. Maybe after, we don't know the future, but likelihood is low. So that's it. Now let us go to the dynamic nature of risk assessment. Risk does not stay static, it keeps changing as environmental changes. As you can see from this diagram, the arrow is going towards right, from static to dynamic. Okay, and no one likes dynamic, I know for a fact, because it's turbulent, it's very uncertain. You need to keep changing your strategy or risk management. But yes, the practical world is, and now if you see the situation, current situation, it's very changes at the pace is very high. Usually change used to happen, but before 10-20 years back, it used to take time for a change to happen. Now the change is very fast, and one biggest example of the change in the risk management is, or I would say environmental change, is what? The COVID, right? COVID is one of the major changes that happened in the environment, which entirely changed the market, which brought out so many risks, and so many risks are wiped away. So it's a very dynamic thing, right? So let's see. Uh, on the left hand side, there are three boxes. Right hand side, there are three boxes. Left hand side are static, right hand side are dynamic. We'll compare each one. Okay. Left hand side, nothing in the internal environment changes. Right hand side, internal environment constantly change. Internal things like inside the organization, like product launches, financial restructuring, right? Product launches, you might change the date, or financial restructuring, where you change the capital structure of the company or the way the company is financed. For example, equity debt, or you might sell off to go to demerger. Okay, those things you don't have to know it. You will be knowing it in your AFF. What is financial restructuring? For under that, we have a separate section itself on financial restructuring. Okay, this is just a brief explanation for those who does not know what is financial restructuring. If you want to know more about it, you can Google it. Then second box, nothing in the external environment changes versus external environment changes. External environment beyond your control, outside your organization, like customer requirements. Can you control customer requirements? No, it is outside your control. Customer requirements might change. Okay, resource supplies might change. For example, now who thought that online education will be growing at a high pace after the COVID? No one thought about it. We were having the normal classroom where teachers are there, students are there, one-to-one classes are there. But now who thought that online market will go take the market, right? So that's the thing. Risk facing the business never change. In the static environment, dynamic risk always changes. Okay. Let's take an example from an oil company. We have two types of risk X and risk Y to understand. Risk X, okay, we'll see the change in the position in the diagram, in the map. Okay, the risk X and risk Y. Risk X is a major leak, okay, at one of the offshore oil platforms. Okay, how this has been classified? It has been classified as high impact, isn't it? Because if you have a major leak in an offshore oil platform, it will be a high impact, because it will require substantial expenditure to repair it and rectify the environmental damage once it happens. And also the likelihood is high, because it's very complex. Okay, the complexity of the deep sea oil drilling operations and the large number of platforms operated. Why likelihood? Why occurrence of it happening is very likely? Because you have everywhere, there are so many platforms out there. Okay, in so many places you're operating, somewhere though it might leak might be here there, no? If it was one place, okay, likelihood will be less. Why? Because we can look after that one place. But if there's so many places, how many places will you look after? One or the other places might have face the leakage, right? So at this stage, the risk is shown as X1 in the risk map below. We'll see in the next slide. Next, after this, another slide, and then so now that is the static environment. Let us go to the dynamic. What happened? Regulation changed. Okay, regarding the establishment of new deep sea oil platforms. You need to develop this, establish that. A new restrictions came there. So because of this, what happened? Company will now have a fewer platform than before. Earlier they had platform everywhere. Now, can they establish deep sea oil platform everywhere? It's complex. It's not easy. So now they'll have fewer platforms in operations. Because of that, several will close down. Okay. So because many are closing down, new ones cannot be opened, what happens? Probability reduced or increased? Probability of leakage will now reduce. So the risk went from X1 to X2 on the risk map. We'll see the map later. Now let us go through risk Y, another type of risk. Here, the risk is that company will be unable, same example, oil company. Company will be unable to recruit the permanent members of staff. Okay, this is a low impact. Why? Impact is low because you can still hire the contract staff instead of having permanent employees. So even if you have permanent employees or not, impact is less because you can go with the contract staff. But it's a high probability. Probability is high. Why? Because company offering below market average salaries. The position is shown at Y1. What does it mean probability is high? Company offering below market average salaries. What does it mean? If you're offering below market average salaries to employees, your employees will go away, even the contract staff. So the probability of that risk of you not having employees high in that condition. Next, an internal policy decision has been made that salary package will be improved. Improvements, it will increase. It needs to increase. So because of this, now position goes from Y1 to Y2. Earlier it had high probability, now there will be low probability of employees leaving your organization because if they are paid well off, why should they leave? So impact is low as before, but probability became from high to low. Y1 to Y2. Now this is the position. Impact low high, probability low high. Y1 to Y2, X1 to X2. What happened? Impact of X remained high, that is oil leakage. It went from high, but the probability changed from high to low because you are closing some of the locations. So probability of the leakage is now from becoming high to low. Y1, what is happening is a recruitment of staff. Once you improve the salary package, probability of them leaving reduces from high to low. It falls from high to low. But impact remains same, low. So Y1 to Y2. Understanding? In both condition X1 and Y2, what's happening? Probability is falling down. Earlier the probability is high in both, now it is becoming low. But the impact remains the same. That's what is happening, and it keeps changing because once you plot risk as, let's say, high high or under low low or high low low high, it does not remain there forever. It keeps changing. Remember that, because of dynamic nature of the risk. Now we are going to the risk perception. This is the ninth topic. Okay, risk perception. Either you can do objective measurement or you can do subjective measurement. Objective, by the nature, we know that we can measure, we can prove something with evidence. Or subjective, you can't. First we'll go through objective. What is the impact? For example, number of homes are affected if a local power distribution plant ceases to operate. Why? It's an objective measure. Because number of homes that is served by that plant, you can know. Because it covers a specific geographical area. So through that, you know how many homes are served by that plant, how many homes are affected. You can measure something. Likelihood, what could be a likelihood? Example of likelihood, which is objective measurement of risk. Drawing an egg of space out of a normal pack of cards, that is 1 in 52 chance. It's a risk, no? What if egg does not come? But you can at least measure. It's an objective risk. Coming to the subjective measurement, what is the impact? The examples are different, by the way, in all the four. Subjective, the impact. Amount of revenue lost by the business if websites are down due to loss of power. Impact. Okay, why this is subjective? That you are going to lose revenue in the website if power is less, loss of power, because it amount of revenue that flows through the website, how can you measure it, especially when the power is down? During that time, what the revenue, how much revenue you are losing, how can you measure it? It's very hard. That's why it's subjective. And likelihood, the FTSE 100 raises prices by 50 points. This is more like probability, impact is more like the intensity. Okay, the extremeness. So the materiality, okay, the likelihood. FTSE 100 rises by 50 points in the next week. This could be affected by so many variables that it would be impossible. How do you know it will rise by 50 points? Even if it rises by 50 points, how do you know what is the factor behind it? There are so many variables that could make this FTSE 100 rise to 50, or you might not even rise to 50. So it's very impossible for you to quantify and say it will increase by 50 points. That's the risk. Impossible to quantify. That's why it's subjective. Now, under risk perception, we do these things. Okay, this is how we try to manage the risk. First one is known as scenario planning. What do you do in scenario planning? And these are different. Okay, they're not the same. Scenario planning, and next we have simulation and all. What is scenario planning? Scenario planning is where you do different possible views of the future. You view the future, but you have different outcomes. For example, if this happens, this is the scenario, this will happen, this is the scenario, this is how the risk will be. You discuss this with the organization. Next is you do sensitivity analysis. Sensitivity analysis is value of different factors which could affect an outcome. There are many factors that could affect an outcome. That means you want to see how sensitive the outcome is to the changes in that variable. You change one variable and you see how sensitive the outcome is. One example is, because I used to teach AFM, so from that only I'm taking this example. I'm sure my AFM students know this. Sensitivity analysis, we did it in AFM. So there, how do you see? If you want to know the impact of change in the net present value, like how much a variable needs to change before net present value can become zero or negative. It's a risky thing, right? You do not want it to fall below zero or negative. You want net present value to be positive. So you change one of the variables. There are so many variables which can affect a net present value. One example is sales or the cost, because sales minus cost, the cash flow you see, right? Sales minus cost, and that's how you get the net present value. So maybe the sale price, how much a sale price has to fall down before the net present value can become negative. That's a sensitivity analysis you are doing. So sensitivity analysis, when once you do, you get a answer in terms of percentage. Let's say sale price is now 14. Okay, if it becomes 2, you don't say like that from 4 to 2. You take it in terms of percentage. Okay, there's a way of calculating that. It is calculated in terms of percentage. My AFM students will know this, but for you, you don't have to know it now. In this level, SBL will not be asked to do calculations, but know that this is how sensitivity analysis are done. Okay, or maybe you people after this paper or in the future might plan to do AFM, so there you will come across the sensitivity analysis. There you will be doing calculations also, especially in the net present value part. Okay, so why did I say sale price needs to fall down for net present value to fall down? Because I mean, see, sale, it's a positive figure. Sale, if it's higher, your net present value will be at a better position. If it's less, net present value will go down. So sale price is affected by two things. One is the revenue, sales price and sales volume. Either volume has to fall down, either revenue, sorry, price has to fall down. Mostly volume does not fall down. Okay, no one drops the volume of the sales like that, but prices keeps changing up and down. So how much net present value will get affected, how sensitive it is. Higher the percentage, higher, very sensitive it is. Lower the percentage, very sensitive it is. That means even by change in a small amount, number will become negative. Even by a change in small amount, up and down does not matter. Okay, if a number is percentage is bigger, let's say 60%, that means it's less sensitive. Why higher percentage is less sensitive and smaller number is more sensitive? See, more percentage, let's say 60%. Okay, assume you did sensitivity analysis doing two calculations you did. Once in one place you are getting 4%, the other one you are getting 60%. Which one is more sensitive, the 4% or the 60%? 60%. So 4% is more sensitive. How? That means if something by something, a price or the volume or whatever variable changes by 4%, the outcome changes by a bigger amount, or it goes to negative or whatever. The impact is negative, let's assume. So changes of 4% is more likely, or change of 60% is more likely? If I say price fall down by 4% is more likely, or price fell down by 60% is more likely, which one is more likely to happen in the short term? 4%, right? 4% is more value, like more believable also. It can happen. Small percentages, yes, because things usually changes by small percentage only. Does not change by so drastically by a big amount, that also in a short term. So that's why 4% is more sensitive and 60% is less sensitive. 60% does not happen, no? Does not happen in day or two. Does not happen in the short term. 60% fall in price, no? Understanding. Third is decision trees. Yes, I know that decision tree came in your mind. That's very good. Often used in the management of projects where you have to decide which project to go on, because there are uncertainties at each stage. So you evaluate based on what? Expected value. I'm sure you know how to calculate expected value, right? Isn't it? You should be knowing at this age, by the way, even if it is not explained in SBL. Don't assume everything will be explained in SBL. From your earlier studies, you should accumulate the knowledge. You should be knowing how to calculate expected value. Yes, it is multiplication of two numbers. Multiply what by what by what? Probability into the outcome. Expected outcome. If there are three and then you add this three and you see whatever gives you the highest expected value, you choose that one. Yes, correct. So you go by the likelihood, that means the probability. Calculate the probability will be given to you, and the cash flow from each possible outcome. Multiply the likelihood with the cash flow. That's how you get the expected value. If there are three decisions you need to make, three different branches, three expected value you will get. Compare the highest, and accordingly you can choose. Okay. Now we have more. That's not it. We have computer simulations like Monte Carlo simulation. This we did in AFM. Okay, my AFM students know what is Monte Carlo simulation. You don't have to carry out a simulation. It's not expected in any paper in ACCA, not even in AFM, not even in SBL. But know that through computer simulation also you can manage risk. Okay, what do you do there? In the Monte Carlo simulation, you use probability distributions, and you can run it repeatedly, not just once or twice, repeatedly, whatever, 100 times, 200 times, to identify many possible scenarios and outcomes for a project. Not just one scenario, 100,000 scenarios you can create. But if you are doing it manually, it's very difficult for you, because there are so many formulas and things are needed. But if you are doing, because you are using probability distribution, if you are doing it through a computer, Excel will help you to do it much faster. It will give you a vast range of scenarios. Software packages are there, which are designed to assist in risk identification as well as analysis process. Okay, you don't need to know what are the software packages and all. I mean, for the exams point of view, but it's good to know. Okay, better you can research in Google if you want to. Analysis of the existing data. You analyze the existing data. You think that what was the impact of the risk in the past, and you accordingly you connect a relationship that if this risk has this impact in the past, in future also it might have a similar this thing, right? Even though this is not a very good thing to do, but it is used. I mean, it's given there in the list. So illustration 1, let us illustrate through this Northern Rock and risk management. Okay, so what happened was the first para. Okay, I'm going to when I explain you, I'm going to tell you which para I am at. Okay, so that it becomes easy. I'm in the first para now. Okay, and the share price plummeted by over 90% in 2007-8 during credit crunch. Okay, what happened in the end? Northern Rock became the first UK bank to experience a run by its customer since 1866, first time ever in the history. After that, state nationalization followed shortly afterwards. 90%. Second, what happened? What are the reasons of this? Why 90% it plumped? Because of the credit crunch. Why so much impact for the Northern Rock and not other banks or other company? Obviously, the company got affected. I'm not saying they didn't get affected by the credit crunch, but why Northern Rock so much? The reasons that they have put forward in the second paragraph is lack of risk management. Lack of risk management. Now do you know why risk management is so important? It is so very important, especially when the companies are a big level companies, big corporates, giant corporates, MNCs. Not only affects the country, it affects the whole economic system. Okay, so risk management is not a small thing. It's a very big thing, right? They fail to manage their risk. In which area? Especially in the lending policy, the way they used to lend. Okay, and it almost relied totally on the other bank lending to fund its growth. Bank lending. They totally relied that bank will lend and that's how they are going to fund its growth. They relied on that only. So what happened? In addition, in addition to that, what did the bank do? They used investment product so complexly, it's so complex that they couldn't even explain their staff how to use it. Staff also didn't understand how to use it. Which what happened after that? So they couldn't evaluate what is the risk exposure from their staff or even from their from their customer. They couldn't evaluate their own risk exposure as well as that from the customer that they're going to get. What is the risk from the customer? They might not pay you. Credit risk is there or not? So credit risk as well as your own risk, because it's so complex the product that your own staff didn't understand how to manipulate. So how to mitigate the risk or deal with the risk. Last para talks about in line with all major banks. Okay, Northern Rock they spend millions of dollars qualifying whom individuals, qualified individuals, so that they can assess the risk through risk management software. They spend millions in that. But even then, what happened? Even after employing such a qualified individuals for the risk management, shareholders were receiving only 5 pence per share, 5 pence after nationalization. Whereas other company, okay, at that time in the company's flotation in 2000 was earning around £5, whereas Northern Rock was earning 5 pence per share, other companies £5. Can you see the difference? Can you see the difference from 5 pence to £5? Next, and the last is risk register. What is risk register? It's like a register. You list all the risk. Simple. You follow a tabular document. Whenever risk register is given to in the SBL exam, remember guys, do it in a tabular format with various headings you need to put. Follow this guideline. Okay. You start with the risk title, number 1. Okay. And you need to follow this order, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 12 points. Okay. This I will explain you with the example also before I end this lecture, because this lecture is at the end now. We are at the end. So first is the risk title. What is the name of the title? Second, likelihood of the risk. Don't worry, example is there. Okay, after this I'm going to give you the example how to do this, the 12 steps. Second is likelihood of the risk. Likelihood, when you're giving, you can give it on a scale from 1 to 5. 1 means unlikely, 5 means very likely, highly likely. Okay. Third is impact. Again same, 1 to 5. 1 is low impact, 5 is high impact. So always remember like this. 1 is a less number, like a lower figure. Lower means low impact, unlikely. 5 is a bigger number. That means impact is high, is highly likely. You understanding? Highly likely, high impact. So this is how you can easily memorize also. Whether 1 is high or low or 5 is high or low. Okay, 1 is low, 5 is high. 1 is low impact, high is high impact. 4. The risk owner's name will be given. Usually a manager or a director. He could be anyone. Okay. Name has to be given. Who is the risk owner? Who is owning this risk? 5. The date that risk was identified. 6. The date the risk was last considered. That means you have to give 2 dates. 7. Mitigation actions. What mitigation actions you did? You have to list. Like what the company has done so far to reduce that risk that you have identified. Maybe you can include things like you have done some training to your staff, or you have put some further controls added to the system, things like that. Number 8, an overall risk rating. That the range is from 1 to 10. You give a rating out of 1 to 10. Overall risk, okay? So when you go through this scale, managers will immediately know through the risk register which risk needs more focus. Okay? 9. Further actions that needs to be taken. 10. The action lead name will be detailed. I mean, example, who is responsible for making sure that this further actions are implemented? There should be someone who has to be there to make sure that this further actions that you have suggested in number 9 are implemented also. 11, a due date will be stated. I mean, when is the due date? By when should the action has to be implemented? And finally, number 12 is a risk level target might be given. That means what level should be a risk at? A target has to be given. And remember, whatever the score you give to number 12 has to be lower than what you have given in step 8. That is your overall risk rating. Your From your overall risk rating, your risk level target should be less always. It should fall down. That is the whole idea behind doing all the steps, doing further actions, having a due date for the implementation so that you can reduce the risk level. Understanding? So if you implement a control, you train your staff, you do insurance, what happens? Risk rating, let's say it was 8 before, now it fell down to 2. So 2 is your target risk level. That means this is your target. You want your risk level to fall from 8 to 2. Simply. Now let us go through an example. So number 1, what is it? Can you recall? Name of the risk. What is the name of the risk? Loss of personal data. Second, likelihood. 1 to 3, 1 to 5. 1 is likelihood is less unlikely, 5 is highly likely. So this 3 is in the middle level. Okay, that means it's average. I mean, not too likely, not too unlikely. Impact is 5. That means highly, it's high. Impact is high. Risk owner. Who is the risk owner's name is given as Mike Smith, the IT manager. It could be a manager, it could be director, anyone. Okay, make sure you write as a writer or a manager. 5, the date that you have identified the risk. 1/1/12, first of the Jan 2012, and the date. What is the sixth date? Recall. It is after. Obviously, it will be after the fifth one only. I mean, it cannot be before 1st of Jan 2012 because that is the day you identified the risk. Okay, you have reviewed the risk on 2 to 14, 2nd Feb 14, after 2 years. That means that was the date last you have taken action. Last you have taken into consideration was 2014 after you have identified. 7th, what did you do to mitigate the risk? What actions? You trained your staff for 2 years. How? It's not enough to say you train the staff, train the staff, train the staff in all the answers. No. Be very specific. What is the risk? Loss of personal data regarding your IT and all, mobile phone. So when you explain the risk also, training, you have to say, like how? In this case, all laptops are encrypted. Maybe in your scenario, laptops might not be given. You might be given some other company. So you cannot go and say all laptops are encrypted. You have to give whatever the product given to you, whatever the risk given to you. Here, since it is loss of personal data, from laptop or mobile phone only personal data can go, right? So all laptops are encrypted. This is what you are doing, action to mitigate the risk. After that, regular audits you are taking, and any incident that occurs are reported to the audit committee. So these are the 3 actions. Number 8, what is overall risk rating? 7. It's not good. It's more towards 10. It's not good. Higher than 5, I would say it's not a good rating. Then number 9, what did you do? What is number 9? Think. What could be number 9? Because I know by now you forgot also what is number 9. If you can remember, it's good. You can go back to my video and check. Okay. So it is encryption technology to be implemented. Okay. Further action. Exactly. Number 9 is what? By reading it, you know it's further action. How? To be implemented, to be done. Something to do, to be done in the future. You have not done it, but it has to be done. So it is further action. Encryption technology to be implemented which meets industry standard. What do you do? Further action? Implement the encryption technology so that data are not stolen. Number 10, Mike Smith. He is who? He's the owner of the risk. Who's going to assess the risk? Who is going to make sure that it has been implemented? Mike Smith. Same person that we have identified as the risk owner. 11th. This is the date. Due date that it needs to get implemented. 31st July 2014. And 12th is what? Risk level target. From 7, it has to go down to 3. It cannot be the other way around. Okay. You cannot write 8 there or 9 or 10 there. Not even 7 is not a good idea. But yes, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. Don't keep 0, okay? I mean, 0 is not something which is practical. Not even 1 and 2. 1 and 2 is also very this thing. But yeah, if it was like, let's say 4, okay, you can say from 4 to 1 and 2. But don't keep it 0, okay? So that's it. So we finished this lecture here. Now let us go through the summary. Okay, long lecture. You must have forgotten what is there. So we'll start from the beginning. What we have covered. We started with the risk. We identified what is risk. It is an exposure of adverse consequences of future event. Something which is going to be done in the future. For that, you are going to face the consequences. Adverse consequences. That is there's a chance of you facing that. So it's a risk. Second, we went through corporate governance. Okay, what is the main risk? Failure to meet their regulations. Then we went through the OECD 4 principles, the principles of good corporate governance. Okay, what are the 4 principles? Can you remember if I tell you to recall? Treatment of shareholders, equal treatment of shareholders, equal treatment of other stakeholders. Sorry, right of shareholders, equitable treatment of stakeholders and shareholders, disclosure and transparency. And the fourth one? What is the fourth one? I myself have forgot actually. So yeah, think. So it's your job. Go back and search, right? I'm not going to tell you. Okay, following the good corporate governance procedures will decrease the impact of any risk on an organ. Okay, so when you follow the good corporate procedure, reduces the impact of risk on an organization. That's why corporate governance was important. Then we went through risk management responsibilities. We told that managing risk is important because it reduces the possibility of risk occurring. Then managements are responsible for this risk management, not anyone, not auditor or anyone else. Why to incur risk then? Because to generate higher returns and also to be competitive. But ALARP. What is ALARP? You can have a risk, but risk should not be too high. There's a limit, as low as reasonably possible. Keep your risk as low as reasonably possible, that you can keep your risk up to that level. You can be competitive, not beyond that. Then we went through identification of risk, strategic and operational. Strategic affects overall mission, operational affects day-to-day activities. Okay, then we went through generic versus specific. Generic affects all business, like interest rate, non-compliance with company law. Sector specific risk affects specific sector. Example, particular legislation for that particular sector or density of competition. Then we went through related and covariant risk, like positive and negatively correlated risk. Then we went through assessment of risk. In the under assessment of risk, what was the impact on the stakeholders? Depends on how close the stakeholders are. Some stakeholders will be impacted more than the others. Then will mitigate risk by distancing. How stakeholders can reduce this impact? They can distance themselves completely from the company. Assessment by severity and probability. Severity means what is the impact, probability means likelihood. Risk perception, subjective versus objective. Objective means you can measure it with scientific accuracy. Subjective is difficult to assign a value to. Okay, then thank you for watching and see you in the next lecture of risk, where we are going to talk about the continuation of this managing, monitoring and mitigating risk. So till then, see you and thanks for watching.